Welcome to Galactic Nova Stories, where cosmic emotions come to life. Your journey begins now. The observation deck of Haven Prime stretched before Jake Morrison like a crystalline cathedral, its transparent walls offering an unobstructed view of the Andromeda Transit Hub. Ships of 100 different species glided past in elegant formations, their hulls gleaming against the star-scattered void. As the newest human diplomatic attaché to the station, Jake still felt overwhelmed by the sheer diversity of life that called this place home. He was supposed to be reviewing trade agreements, but instead found himself watching a young Velani scientist struggle with a piece of equipment near the far corner of the deck. Her pale blue skin caught the starlight, and the delicate fins along her neck fluttered with obvious frustration. The device, some kind of atmospheric analyzer, seemed to be giving her trouble. Jake had always been the type to help first and ask questions later. It was a trait that had gotten him both promoted and reprimanded throughout his career. Today would prove to be both. "Need a hand?" he called out, approaching with the easy confidence that marked him as unmistakably human. The Velani looked up with large violet eyes that seemed to hold the depth of ocean trenches. Yes, actually. This calibration sequence requires precise harmonic resonance, but I cannot achieve the proper frequency alone. Jake nodded, as if he understood completely, though harmonic resonance was about as foreign to him as quantum poetry. "What do you need me to do?" "Place your hands here," she indicated 2 crystalline contact points on the device, "and when I begin the sequence, mirror my movements exactly. The timing must be perfect." What Jake didn't know, human could have known, was that the gesture she was asking him to perform held profound significance in Velani culture. The synchronized hand movements, the shared rhythm, the deliberate mirroring of another's actions while maintaining eye contact, it was the most sacred expression of bonding between 2 souls. The young scientist, whose name was Kira, had been so focused on her work that she hadn't considered the cultural implications. She simply needed someone with steady hands and good reflexes to help complete her research. Jake positioned his hands carefully, watching her face for guidance. When she began the sequence, he followed with surprising grace for a species known more for stubbornness than synchronicity. Their movements flowed together like a carefully choreographed dance, hands rising and falling in perfect harmony. The moment stretched between them, filled with something neither had expected. Jake found himself lost in the rhythm, in the strange beauty of the alien ritual, in the way Kira's eyes seemed to glow brighter as they moved together. There was something profound happening here, something that transcended the simple act of equipment calibration. When the sequence ended and the device hummed to life with a satisfied chime, Kira stared at Jake with an expression of wonder and shock. Her fins had gone perfectly still, and her hands remained poised in the final position of the ceremony. "What's your name?" she whispered, her voice carrying a tremor that had nothing to do with the station's artificial gravity. "Jake Morrison." "Diplomatic Corps. And you are?" "Kira. Kira of the 3rd Deep Current." She paused, seeming to struggle with something momentous. "Jake Morrison of the Human. Do you understand what we have just done?" The honest confusion on his face was answer enough. Around them, the observation deck continued its quiet evening rhythm, but for Kira, the universe had just shifted on its axis. This human, this strange and wonderful being from a species barely known among the galactic community, had just offered her the most precious gift her people could give, and he had done it with such genuine sincerity that it took her breath away. Every great bond starts with a single moment of courage. Galactic Nova Stories is just beginning, and your support matters. If you love emotional sci-fi tales, forbidden connections, and stories that stay with you, hit subscribe. It's free, and it helps us bring more stories from the stars to you. Jake sensed that something significant had occurred, though he couldn't quite grasp what. The way Kira looked at him, the sudden intensity in her violet eyes, the reverent silence that had fallen between them, it all suggested that his simple offer to help had become something much more important. "I think," he said carefully, "I might have just done something I don't understand." Kira's expression softened, and for the first time since they'd met, she smiled, an expression that transformed her already beautiful features into something luminous. Yes, she said simply. You have. The next morning arrived with all the subtlety of a supernova. Jake had barely finished his regulation coffee, a luxury that cost him half his weekly stipend on Haven Prime, when his door chimed with the insistent rhythm of official business. He opened it to find Director Walsh, his immediate superior, flanked by 2 members of the Villani diplomatic contingent. Morrison, Walsh's voice carried the tone of a man trying very hard not to panic. We need to talk. The Villani elder stepped forward, her fins a deeper blue than Kira's, and marked with the intricate scarification that denoted high rank among her people. I am Elder Naya of the First Deep Current. I believe congratulations are in order. Jake blinked, still clutching his coffee cup like a lifeline. Congratulations for what? Your bonding ceremony with Kira of the Third Deep Current was witnessed by 3 species and recorded by the station's cultural documentation protocols. It is quite official. The coffee cup slipped from Jake's suddenly nerveless fingers, but Elder Naya caught it with reflexes that belied her apparent age. Bonding ceremony. I helped her calibrate some equipment. Director Walsh ran his hands through his graying hair. Jake, the Villani bonding ritual involves synchronized hand movements, sustained eye contact, and shared harmonic resonance. Apparently, you performed it flawlessly, but I didn't know. Intent is secondary to action in Villani culture, Elder Naya explained with surprising gentleness. The ritual connects souls at a level deeper than conscious thought. Your spirit recognized hers and responded in kind. This is considered the purest form of bonding, one free from political machination or social expectation. Jake sank into his desk chair, mind reeling. So I'm married? To an alien? By accident? The concept doesn't translate perfectly to human understanding, Elder Naya continued. But yes, essentially, among my people the bond is sacred and permanent. There has never been an interspecies bonding in our recorded history. Director Walsh leaned forward. The question is, what do we do about it? Can it be annulled, reversed? The diplomatic implications alone? No. The quiet voice from the doorway brought all conversation to a halt. Kira stood there wearing formal robes that shimmered like captured starlight. Her fins were held high and proud, and her violet eyes blazed with determination. No, it cannot be reversed, and I would not want it to be, she continued, stepping into the room with fluid grace. Elder Naya, with respect, you speak of diplomatic implications as if they outweigh the heart's truth. Elder Naya's fins fluttered in what Jake was beginning to recognize as surprise. Child, you cannot be serious. This human is kind, Kira interrupted. Sincere. When I asked for help, he gave it without hesitation or expectation of reward. When our hands moved together in the bonding dance, I felt his spirit, curious, generous, brave in a way my people have forgotten how to be. Jake found his voice again. Kira, I appreciate what you're saying, but I trapped you into this without meaning to. I can't let you sacrifice your future for my ignorance. She turned to face him fully, and Jake felt that same electric connection from the night before. You did not trap me, Jake Morrison. You freed me. My people have become so focused on tradition, on the proper forms and ancient ways, that we've lost sight of what bonding truly means. You showed me what it feels like to connect with someone without pretense or agenda. Elder Naya's fins had gone completely still, a sign of deep contemplation that Jake was quickly learning to read. The implications of accepting this bonding extend far beyond personal happiness, child. The Council of Deep Currents will not approve. Other species will question our judgment. The humans themselves may reject the union. Then we'll face those challenges together, Kira said simply. Isn't that what bonding means? Director Walsh cleared his throat. All personal feelings aside, we need to consider the political ramifications. The Villani are one of our most important trading partners. If their leadership objects to this union, then maybe it's time for new leadership, Jake said quietly. The words surprised him as much as anyone else, but once spoken, he found he meant them completely. Look, I may have stumbled into this situation, but I'm not about to abandon Kira to face the consequences alone. If she's willing to take a chance on this bonding, then so am I. Elder Naya studied them both for a long moment, her ancient eyes seeming to peer into their very souls. Finally, her fins relaxed into a posture Jake instinctively recognized as acceptance. "Very well," she said. "But know this. The path ahead will test you both in ways you cannot imagine. The Council will demand proof that this bonding serves the greater good of both our species. Are you prepared for that challenge?" Jake looked at Kira, seeing his own determination reflected in her violet gaze. "We are." "Then, may the deep currents guide you both," Elder Naya said solemnly. "You are about to make history one way or another." News of the bonding spread through Haven Prime's corridors like wildfire through dry timber. By noon, Jake couldn't walk 10 meters without being stopped by curious onlookers, outraged traditionalists, or beings who simply wanted to witness history. In the making. The attention was overwhelming, but it was nothing compared to the formal protests that began arriving within hours. The Crystalline Collective submitted a formal complaint citing concerns about genetic contamination protocols. The hegemony of 12 worlds demanded a review of all interspecies interaction guidelines. Most concerning of all, a faction of Elder Villani had arrived on the station unannounced, their presence as ominous as storm clouds gathering on the horizon. Jake found sanctuary in the Botanical Gardens, a peaceful section of the station where earth plants grew alongside flora from dozens of worlds. The sweet scent of Terran roses mingled with the ozone-sharp fragrance of Altarian crystal flowers, creating an atmosphere that felt like home and adventure all at once. Kira was already there when he arrived, sitting beside a fountain that sang, with harmonic frequencies designed to promote cross-species relaxation. She looked smaller somehow, more fragile than she had the night before. "Regretting your decision?" Jake asked gently, settling beside her on the moss-covered bench. "Never," she said firmly, though her fins betrayed a tremor of uncertainty. "But I am afraid. The Elder Council arrived an hour ago. They're demanding an immediate nullification ceremony. Can they force that?" Kira's laugh held no humor. "They can try. But the bonding touched something deeper than law or tradition, Jake. I felt your soul recognize mine. That cannot be simply erased because it inconvenienced the political order." Before Jake could respond, footsteps approached along the garden path. A familiar figure emerged from between the flowering trees, Captain Rex Stone of the Human Defense Corps, Jake's old friend from their academy days. "Jake Morrison," Rex called out, with the easy grin that had gotten them both into and out of countless scrapes during their youth. "Leave it to you to start an interstellar incident on your first diplomatic assignment." Jake stood, clasping his friend's hand in greeting. "Rex, what are you doing here?" "Official business, unfortunately. Command sent me to assess the situation and provide support if needed." Rex's expression grew serious as he turned to Kira. "Ma'am, I'm Captain Stone. It appears you've gotten tangled up with the most trouble-prone human in the diplomatic corps." "Captain Stone," Kira inclined her head gracefully. "Your friend has shown me nothing but kindness and courage." "That sounds like Jake," Rex agreed. "Always jumping into things without looking, but once he commits to something, nothing in the universe can make him back down. I've seen him argue with superior officers to protect civilian populations, risk his career to expose corruption, and once he spent 3 days in a Martian ice cave to rescue a cat." "It was a very important cat," Jake protested. Rex's grin returned. "My point is, if Jake says he's committed to this bonding, then you've got the loyalty of someone who doesn't know how to quit. That might count for something with your people." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Director Walsh, who looked like he'd aged 5 years in the past 24 hours. Behind him walked 3 figures that made Kira's fins go rigid with apprehension, members of the Villani Elder Council in full ceremonial regalia. "Kira of the Third Deep Current," the center figure spoke with the authority of deep ocean trenches. "You will accompany us immediately. This aberration ends now." "Elder Thane," Kira rose gracefully, though Jake could see the tension in her shoulders. "I am bound by sacred ritual. You cannot simply—" "Sacred?" Elder Thane's fins flared with indignation. "You mock our most precious traditions by applying them to an alien species that cannot possibly understand their significance." Jake stepped forward, placing himself slightly in front of Kira. "With respect, Elder, I may not understand all the nuances of your culture, but I understand commitment, I understand loyalty, and I understand that Kira deserves better than being treated like property to be disposed of at your convenience." Elder Thane's violet eyes fixed on Jake with laser intensity. "You dare lecture me on Villani values, human?" "I dare stand up for someone I care about," Jake replied steadily. "Isn't that what the bonding is supposed to represent? Two souls choosing to face the universe together?" A new voice cut through the tension like a blade through silk. "The human speaks wisdom." Everyone turned to see Elder Naya approaching, flanked by two beings Jake didn't recognize, one a towering crystalline with faceted skin that caught the garden's light, the other a sleek Aquarian whose gills fluttered with what Jake was learning to interpret as interest rather than distress. "Elder Naya," Thane's voice carried warning, "surely you do not support this violation of our sacred ways." "I support the possibility of growth," she replied calmly. "Ambassador Quartz of the Crystalline Collective and Speaker Tide of the Aquarian Alliance have requested to observe these proceedings. It seems the galaxy is watching to see how we handle this unprecedented situation." Ambassador Quartz stepped forward, their crystalline voice ringing like wind chimes. "The Collective finds this development intriguing. Perhaps it is time to explore new forms of connection between species." Speaker Tide's response came as a series of musical tones that the station's translation systems rendered as, "The Alliance agrees." Rigid tradition serves no one when it prevents understanding. Elder Thane's fins flattened against his neck in obvious frustration. "You would risk our entire cultural foundation for one impulsive girl's fancy?" "I would risk stagnation for the chance at evolution," Elder Naya replied. "But the choice is not mine alone to make. The Council must decide, and perhaps we should allow these two souls to prove the worth of their bonding before we dismiss it entirely." Jake felt Kira's hand slip into his, her skin cool and smooth against his palm. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The next few days fell into a rhythm that surprised Jake with its natural feel. While the diplomatic machinery churned around them, emergency sessions, formal protests, and endless committees, he and Kira found themselves drawn together by something deeper than political convenience or cultural accident. They met each morning in the Cultural Exchange Center, a neutral space designed for interspecies learning. Kira had insisted on teaching Jake about Villani customs, while he found himself sharing aspects of human culture that he'd never had to explain before. "Your people bond for life," Jake said, reviewing his notes from their previous session. "No divorce, no separation, no second chances. The bonding connects souls at the quantum level," Kira explained, her fins rippling with the elegant gestures that accompanied formal instruction. "When two spirits resonate in perfect harmony, they become part of a greater whole. To break such a connection would be like tearing away half of one's being." Jake considered this. "That sounds terrifying and beautiful at the same time." "Most profound truths are," Kira agreed. "What troubles me is that I feel this connection with you, even though you are not Villani. Elder Thane insists this proves the bonding was false, but I believe it proves something else entirely." "What's that?" Her violet eyes met his with startling intensity. "That consciousness, true consciousness, transcends physical form. Your spirit resonates at frequencies my people have never encountered, chaotic but harmonious, unpredictable but trustworthy." Jake felt heat rise in his cheeks. "I'm not sure I'm as deep as all that. Humans are pretty straightforward, really. We see something that needs doing, we do it. We find someone who needs help, we help them. We make a commitment, we keep it." "Do you realize how rare that is among the galactic community?" Kira asked. "Most species calculate the cost-benefit ratio of every action. They form alliances based on mutual advantage, not mutual affection. The concept of acting purely from kindness, without expectation of reward, is almost unheard of. That's depressing. That's why your species is so fascinating," she continued. "Humans have only been part of the galactic community for 50 years, yet you've already gained a reputation for being willing to sacrifice for others. During the crystalline crisis, Human ships were the first to respond to distress calls from a species you'd never encountered. In the Outer Rim conflicts, human mediators consistently chose solutions that protected the weak rather than advantaged the strong. Jake shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. We just do what seems right. Exactly, Kira said softly. And that makes you extraordinary. Their afternoon sessions focused on the practical aspects of their situation. Elder Naya had arranged for them to learn about interspecies psychology, the legal frameworks governing cross-cultural unions, and the biological implications of their bonding. Dr. Morgan Webb, the station's chief xenobiologist, had become a frequent visitor to their sessions. The fascinating thing, she explained during one of their meetings, is that the Vellani bonding process seems to have actually worked with Jake's human physiology. Our scans show harmonic resonance patterns in his neural activity that mirror Kira's, something that should be impossible given the evolutionary distance between your species. What does that mean? Jake asked. It means, Dr. Webb said with barely contained excitement, that the bonding ritual doesn't just rely on learned behavior or cultural conditioning. It accesses something fundamental about consciousness itself, something that exists across species lines. Kira's fins brightened to an almost luminous blue. The deep currents speak through all life, regardless of origin. Perhaps the ancestors knew this when they created the bonding ritual. Or maybe, Jake suggested, love really is universal. The simple statement hung in the air between them, carrying more weight than any formal declaration. Jake realized he'd spoken a truth he hadn't fully acknowledged to himself. Somewhere between the diplomatic crises and cultural exchanges, he'd fallen in love with this remarkable being who'd chosen to stake her future on an accidental gesture. Jake, Kira said quietly, may I share something with you? A Vellani secret that even Elder Naya doesn't know. He nodded, sensing the importance of the moment. I wasn't randomly conducting research that night we met. I was there because I'd been watching you, studying how humans interact with other species. Your kindness, your willingness to help without being asked, your ability to find common ground with beings you'd never encountered before. I was fascinated by you long before we accidentally bonded. Jake felt his world shift slightly. You're saying it wasn't really an accident? The calibration problem was real, she said quickly. But I could have asked any number of beings for assistance. I chose to ask you because I wanted to know what it would feel like to work in harmony with a human. And now you know? Kira's smile was radiant. It feels like coming home to a place I've never been. Jake reached for her hand, marveling again at how perfectly their fingers intertwined despite their different origins. So what happens now? The council meeting is tomorrow. Now we prepare to fight for something worth having, Kira said firmly. Together. Outside the cultural center's windows, the stars wheeled in their ancient patterns, indifferent to the small drama playing out in one corner of the galaxy. But Jake had the strange sense that what happened next would matter more than anyone realized, not just for him and Kira, but for the future of interspecies relations throughout the known universe. Tomorrow would bring challenges he couldn't imagine. Tonight he was simply grateful to have found someone worth facing the unknown for. The council chamber had been transformed for the occasion. Representatives from 17 species sat in a great circle, their varied forms creating a tapestry of galactic diversity that should have been beautiful. Instead, the atmosphere crackled, with tension thick enough to cut with a plasma blade. Jake stood with Kira at the center of the circle, feeling distinctly underdressed in his diplomatic uniform, while she wore the formal robes of one facing judgment. Around them, the assembled beings radiated everything from curiosity to outright hostility. Elder Thane rose from his position at the head of the Vellani delegation. We are gathered to address an unprecedented situation, the claimed bonding between a human and a daughter of the deep currents. This matter strikes at the heart of our most sacred traditions. Our position is clear, Elder Thane continued, his fins rigid with formal displeasure. The bonding ritual requires not just physical synchronization, but spiritual resonance that can only exist between members of the same species. What occurred between these two individuals was, at best, a misunderstanding of cultural practices. Ambassador Quartz of the Crystalline Collective responded with harmonics that translated as measured disagreement. The collective has reviewed the station's sensor data from the incident in question. The harmonic frequencies generated during the ritual match documented Villani bonding ceremonies with 97% accuracy. If the bonding is false, the simulation is remarkably complete. Speaker Tide of the Aquarian Alliance added their melodic voice to the discussion. More concerning is the precedent this establishes. If one species can claim spiritual connection to another, what prevents chaos in our carefully maintained diplomatic balance? Jake felt Kira tense beside him as the debate swirled around them like a storm they couldn't control. He cleared his throat, and the chamber fell silent. "With respect to the assembled representatives," Jake said, his voice carrying the confident tone he'd learned in diplomatic training. "You're all talking about us like we're not here, like we don't have a say in our own lives." Elder Thane's violet eyes narrowed. "You are here because your actions have consequences beyond your personal desires, human. The stability of interspecies relations depends on trust," Jake interrupted, earning gasps from several delegates. "Trust that different species can find common ground. Trust that understanding can bridge any gap. Trust that love, yes, love, is stronger than fear." "Pretty words," rumbled Delegate Voss of the Draconic Empire, their scaled hide shifting colors with agitation. "But what proof do you offer? What have you sacrificed for this claimed bonding?" The question hit Jake like a physical blow. What had he sacrificed? His career was actually prospering from the attention. His life had become more interesting, not less. Compared to what Kira faced, potential exile from her people, loss of her scientific position, permanent separation from everything she'd known, his sacrifices seemed insignificant. Elder Naya rose gracefully, her ancient voice cutting through his self-doubt. "Perhaps the question should not be what they have sacrificed, but what they are willing to sacrifice. I propose a traditional trial." The chamber erupted in surprised murmurs. Even Elder Thane looked startled. "Elder Naya," he said carefully, "the trial of hearts has not been invoked in over 3 centuries. It was designed to test bondings between Villani, not aliens," Elder Naya finished calmly. "Precisely why it would be appropriate here. If this human can pass a trial designed for our species, it would prove that the bonding transcends racial boundaries." Jake felt Kira's hand grip his more tightly. "What does the trial involve?" he asked. Elder Naya's fins rippled with what he was learning to recognize as regret mixed with resolve. 3 challenges that test the depth of spiritual connection between bonded pairs. The trial of understanding, where each must demonstrate complete knowledge of the other's inner nature. The trial of sacrifice, where each must choose what they will surrender for their partner's well-being. And the trial of unity, where both must act as one to overcome an impossible obstacle. And if I fail, then the bonding is declared false, and both parties are forbidden from contact with each other for the remainder of their natural lives. The weight of that consequence settled over Jake like a heavy blanket. Never see Kira again. Never hear her laugh or watch her fins brighten when she was excited about a new discovery. Never feel that sense of completeness he'd found in her presence. He looked at her, seeing his own fear reflected in her violet eyes. But beneath the fear was something else, absolute faith in him, in them, in what they'd found together. "I accept the trial," Jake said firmly. Elder Thane leaned forward. "You understand the consequences of failure?" "I understand the consequences of not trying," Jake replied. "Kira deserves someone willing to fight for her, for us." Kira stepped closer, her voice ringing clear in the chamber. "I also accept the trial. If Jake is willing to risk everything for our bonding, then I will stand beside him." Elder Naya nodded solemnly. "Then let it be recorded that the trial of hearts has been invoked for the bonding between Jake Morrison of Earth and Kira, of the 3rd Deep Current. The trial will commence at the next tide cycle." As the delegates began filing out of the chamber, chattering in a dozen languages about this unprecedented development, Jake found himself alone with Kira in the center of the great circle. "Any regrets?" he asked softly. She looked up at him with those remarkable eyes that had captivated him from the first moment. "Only that we must prove to others what I already know in my heart, that we were meant to find each other." Jake pulled her close, marveling again at how perfectly she fit against him, despite their different origins. Tomorrow would bring the trial with challenges he couldn't imagine, and consequences he didn't want to contemplate. Tonight he simply held the being he'd accidentally bonded with, and realized that sometimes the best things in life really did happen when you weren't looking for them. The trial chamber had been configured according to ancient Villani tradition, a circular space filled with flowing water that reflected holographic projections of deep current patterns. Jake stood at one edge of the circle, Kira at the other, while Elder Naya presided from a raised platform that seemed to float above the swirling currents. The assembled observers represented the full spectrum of galactic opinion. Some had come hoping to witness the failure of an impossible union, others curious about whether love really could transcend species barriers. A few, Jake suspected, were genuinely rooting for them to succeed. "The trial of understanding begins," Elder Naya announced, her voice carrying the weight of centuries. "Each participant must demonstrate complete knowledge of their bonded partner's deepest nature, their fears, their dreams, their fundamental truth." A holographic interface materialized before Jake, displaying symbols he didn't recognize but somehow understood. The bonding had given him more than just emotional connection to Kira. It had granted him access to Villani cultural concepts that had no human equivalent. "Kira of the third deep current," Elder Naya intoned, "reveal your partner's greatest fear." Kira's fins rippled with concentration as she accessed the interface. "Jake Morrison fears not being worthy of the trust others place in him. He joined the diplomatic corps not from ambition, but from a desperate need to prove he could build bridges instead of burning them. His greatest terror is that his good intentions will cause harm to those he tries to protect." Jake felt exposed, as if Kira had reached into his chest and pulled out his heart for everyone to examine. She was absolutely right. He'd spent his entire life trying to make up for childhood mistakes that had cost him friendships and family respect. "Jake Morrison," Elder Naya continued, "reveal your partner's deepest truth." Jake closed his eyes, feeling for the connection that had formed between them. The knowledge came not as words but as a feeling, a resonance that spoke to something beyond language. "Kira chose science because she believed logic could protect her from the chaos of emotion," he said slowly. "But her greatest truth is that she feels everything more deeply than she lets anyone know. She studies atmospheric composition because she wants to understand how different worlds breathe, hoping to find ways for all life to coexist in harmony." Kira's eyes widened in surprise. Even she hadn't fully realized that truth about herself until Jake spoke it aloud. Elder Naya nodded, approvingly. "The trial of understanding is complete. The trial of sacrifice begins." The chamber's configuration shifted, creating two separate platforms connected by a narrow bridge over churning water. On each platform appeared an offering bowl, one containing a shimmering substance Jake didn't recognize, the other holding what looked like liquid starlight. "Before you are the means to grant your partner's greatest desire," Elder Naya explained. "Kira of the third deep current, the essence in your bowl will allow Jake Morrison to return to Earth with full honors and a guaranteed position in humanity's highest diplomatic circles. He will have everything he ever wanted from his career." Jake felt his breath catch. It was everything he'd dreamed of since joining the diplomatic corps: recognition, respect, the chance to make a real difference on the galactic stage. "Jake Morrison," Elder Naya continued, "the essence in your bowl will grant Kira the ability to continue her research without restriction, with access to the most advanced laboratories in Villani space and the full support of the Science Directorate. She will achieve scientific immortality." The choice was elegant in its cruelty. Each could give their partner everything they'd ever wanted, but only by drinking from their own bowl first, which would permanently alter their physiology and make interspecies bonding impossible. Jake looked across the bridge at Kira, seeing his own realization reflected in her expression. This wasn't about sacrifice, it was about choosing between personal dreams and shared love. Without hesitation, Jake picked up his bowl and poured its contents into the churning water below. "I don't want scientific immortality for Kira if it means losing her. I want her to have the choice of what her life becomes." Kira's response was immediate and equally decisive. She upended her bowl, letting the shimmering essence splash into the current. "Jake's dreams matter less than Jake himself. I won't buy his success at the cost of our connection." Naya's fins brightened to an almost luminous blue, a sign of deep approval that Jake had learned to recognize. The trial of sacrifice is complete. The trial of unity begins. The chamber transformed one final time, creating a complex maze of floating platforms, energy barriers, and gravitational anomalies. At the center sat a simple crystal that pulsed with gentle light. "You must reach the heart crystal together," Elder Naya explained, "but the path changes constantly, and the obstacles can only be overcome by perfect synchronization between bonded souls. Failure means falling into the deep current, not death but permanent separation, as you are swept to opposite ends of the galaxy." Jake studied the maze, his human mind immediately beginning to calculate angles and timing. But when he reached for Kira's hand, her touch brought a different kind of understanding, one that bypassed logic entirely. They moved as one entity, Jake's human adaptability combining with Kira's intuitive grasp of harmonic resonance. When energy barriers blocked their path, they found the frequency that would dissolve them. When gravity wells threatened to pull them apart, they used their combined momentum to slingshot past danger. The watching delegates murmured in amazement as the human and Villani flowed through the maze like dancers, performing a routine they'd rehearsed for years. What they were witnessing wasn't just physical coordination, it was two different forms of consciousness operating as a unified whole. At the final obstacle, they faced an impossible choice. The path split into two routes, each leading to the heart crystal, but requiring someone to remain behind and manually maintain the energy bridge. Logic dictated that one would have to sacrifice themselves for the other's success. Instead, Jake and Kira looked at each other and smiled. "Together," Jake said. "Together," Kira agreed. They leaped simultaneously, not toward either path, but directly at the heart crystal itself. The move should have been suicide. The distance was too great, the angle impossible. But they're bonded. Consciousness had shown them something the trial's designers hadn't anticipated. The maze responded to unified will as much as physical action. They landed together beside the crystal, their combined touch causing it to flare with brilliant light that filled the chamber. The maze dissolved around them as they stood hand in hand at the center of everything, having achieved the impossible through the simple act of refusing to accept separation. Elder Naya's voice rang with wonder. "The trial of hearts is complete. The bonding stands validated," but Jake barely heard her. He was too busy staring into Kira's violet eyes, seeing his own amazement and joy reflected there. They had done it, not just passed the trial, but proven that love really could transcend any barrier the universe placed in their path. The chamber erupted in a cacophony of responses as delegates from 17 species tried to process what they'd witnessed. But for Jake and Kira, the noise faded to insignificance. They had each other, they had their future, and they had just shown the galaxy that some things were worth fighting for. 3 months after the trial, Jake stood once again on Haven Prime's observation deck. But everything had changed. The same stars wheeled overhead, the same ships glided past in their elegant formations, but he was no longer the uncertain diplomat who had stumbled into an interspecies incident. He was Jake Morrison, bonded mate of Kira of the Third Deep Current, and inadvertent architect of a new era in galactic relations. The changes had come quickly after their successful trial. Within days, the first formal application for interspecies bonding had been filed, a crystalline researcher and an Aquarian engineer who had worked together for decades. Within weeks, the Galactic Council had established the Morrison-Kira Protocols, guidelines for cross-species relationships that balanced cultural sensitivity with individual freedom. Jake's personal transformation had been just as dramatic. The bonding with Kira had somehow enhanced his natural diplomatic abilities, giving him an intuitive understanding of non-human psychology that made him invaluable as a mediator. Instead of being punished for his accidental breach of protocol, he'd been promoted to senior cultural liaison with a mandate to facilitate better understanding between species. But the most profound changes were the ones only he and Kira could see, the way their consciousness had truly merged, creating something greater than either could have achieved alone. "The preliminary results are extraordinary," Kira was saying, as she approached across the deck, her fins bright with excitement. She carried a data pad filled with the findings from her latest research project, a comprehensive study of interspecies bonding that had attracted attention from xenobiologists throughout the galaxy. "Good news?" Jake asked, though her expression had already given him the answer. "Better than good. We've documented 17 successful interspecies bondings in the past 3 months, representing 9 different combinations of species. Each case shows the same phenomenon we experienced, consciousness resonance that enhances the abilities of both partners." Jake reviewed the data, shaking his head in wonder. A hegemony strategist bonded with a draconic philosopher produces enhanced pattern recognition. A human engineer bonded with an Altarian artist creates revolutionary new aesthetic mathematics. It's like the universe has been waiting for us to figure this out. "More likely," Kira said, with the precision that marked her as a scientist even. In her moments of greatest enthusiasm, evolution has been pushing us toward greater cooperation, and we've finally developed the wisdom to listen. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Elder Naya, who had become a frequent visitor to the station since the trial. Her presence no longer filled Jake with nervousness. The bonding had given him enough understanding of Vellani, emotional states to recognize her genuine affection for both him and Kira. "The latest reports from the homeworld," she said without preamble, offering Kira a crystal data storage device. "The Science Directorate has officially endorsed your research and requested permission to establish a permanent interspecies bonding study facility here on Haven Prime." Kira's fins went completely still, a sign of shock so profound she couldn't even process it properly. "The Directorate wants to build a facility? Here?" "Under your supervision," Elder Naya confirmed. "It seems your accidental human has accidentally revolutionized our understanding of consciousness itself." Jake felt a familiar warmth in his chest, the pride he experienced whenever Kira achieved recognition for her brilliance. Through their bond he could feel her joy and amazement at having her work validated by the most prestigious scientific institution in Vellani space. But there was something else in Elder Naya's expression, a depth of satisfaction that suggested more than professional approval. "There's something else," she continued. "The Elder Council has asked me to extend an invitation to both of you. They wish to formally recognize your bonding in a ceremony at the heart of the first deep current, our species' most sacred site." Kira actually gasped, her fins flaring wide with shock. "Elder Naya, that honor has never been extended to anyone outside our species." "These are unprecedented times," Elder Naya replied with a smile. "Perhaps it is time for unprecedented honors." As the Elder departed, leaving them alone with the magnitude of what had just occurred, Jake found himself thinking about the chain of accidents that had brought them to this moment. His decision to help a struggling scientist, Kira's choice to accept an accidental bonding, their mutual determination to fight for something they'd found by chance. "Any regrets?" he asked, the same question he'd posed after their first diplomatic crisis. Kira moved closer, her hand finding his with the natural ease that had developed between them. "Only that it took an accident to bring us together. I should have been brave enough to approach you directly." "Maybe," Jake said thoughtfully. "But if you had, it would have been just another calculated social interaction. The accident made it pure. No agenda, no expectations, just 2 souls recognizing each other." Around them, Haven Prime continued its endless dance of interspecies cooperation, but now it carried new possibilities. In the months since their bonding, Jake had watched barriers fall that had existed for centuries, species that had never interacted. Beyond formal diplomatic protocols, were discovering personal connections. The rigid categories that had defined galactic politics were giving way to something more fluid and hopeful. "Do you think we really changed something important?" Kira asked, following his gaze out to the stars. Jake considered the question seriously. Through their bond, he could feel the answer resonating in both their minds, a shared understanding that went beyond words. "I think we proved that connection is stronger than separation," he said finally. "That understanding can bridge any gap if people are willing to try. That love, real love, doesn't care about species or tradition or what anyone else thinks is possible." Kira leaned against him, her cool skin a perfect complement to his warmth. The deep currents teach that all life is connected at the quantum level. Perhaps humans and Villani were always meant to find each other. Or maybe, Jake suggested with a grin, we just got incredibly lucky. Both can be true, Kira pointed out with scientific precision. Quantum mechanics allows for multiple simultaneous possibilities. Jake laughed, the sound carrying across the observation deck and mixing with the gentle hum of the station's life support systems. Somewhere in that mechanical symphony, he could hear the rhythm of a new future, one where accidents could become destiny, where differences could become strengths, and where two souls could find each other across the vast emptiness of space. The stars wheeled overhead in their ancient patterns, but their light seemed brighter now, full of possibilities that hadn't existed before two beings from different worlds decided to take a chance on something extraordinary. Jake Morrison had come to Haven Prime as a minor diplomatic attaché, with dreams of making a small difference in galactic relations. He was leaving as half of a bonded pair that had accidentally revolutionized the concept of interspecies cooperation. Sometimes he reflected, the best achievements really were the ones you never saw coming.